All right. So next up, we have Ryan Boldt. And so Ryan is a Northern Colorado native, and he earned a BS from Texas Tech and MS from Colorado State, where he is currently finishing his PhD. His research is focused on fertility traits as well as bovine respiratory disease. In his last position, he was director of breed improvement for the Red Angus Association of America. And right now he is currently the lead geneticist for IGS. So with that, let's welcome Ryan. I think you should be set.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. And actually, following Andre, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is kind of very similar concepts and ways to continue to increase the amount of data that we make available or have available in our genetic evaluations. And so, and being part of IGS, I actually get to a very unique opportunity of all the different partners associations have different data collection programs or different data streams. And so what I'm going to talk about today is some of those that are a bit unique that we get to incorporate into our genetic evaluation. And so as we kind of begin here, or we think about the paradigm in terms of data collection in beef cattle, that has fallen solely on the shoulders of seed stock producers, right? That's kind of the point of this organization, is the standardization and collection of those members, of that data and information. And that now kind of the procedure with that is that information is taken and used to make genetic predictions that should cause genetic improvement in the commercial beef industry. And if you've been to any number of BIS, I think over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been talks about the limited amount of data flow that we have coming kind of back through commercial type evaluations. And so this has probably been one limitation and something that has really tried to be tackled over the last 5 to 10 years in terms of what are ways that we can try to feed more of that data back into our genetic evaluation systems. And so kind of to think about it, and as I think about data or potential data sources for use in a genetic evaluation, I think, you know, first and foremost, the first thing we think about is opportunity for that data, or how many records or how many phenotypes could we potentially put into the genetic evaluation if we're able to secure data from different sources. And so I did a little bit of Google searching the other day to get kind of current estimates of what the USDA is estimating in terms of cow numbers in the US. And so as we think about beef animals, they're estimating there's about 28.2 million beef cows. Now, some of this would include seed stock animals, so we would take a few number, or maybe 1 million or so off of that, but still very large opportunities and a lot of animals that potentially are seed stock, or that our seed stock animals are going in, being the genetic influence and give us an opportunity to collect phenotypes and incorporate that into our evaluation. The other one, and it's been mentioned several times, kind of over the last couple of days as well, is the increase in beef on dairy and beef on dairy use of beef cows in dairy herds. The current estimate is about 9.4 million dairy animals in the U.S. And so, as we think about these maybe non-traditional or different sources of data, there's definitely opportunity in terms of additional phenotypes that we could look to incorporate into genetic evaluation. I think another thing that we should consider or want to think about in terms of as we analyze new potential data sources or new, avenues of getting data into the genetic evaluation is also the reliability of that data. And so, many people have talked about over time that low quality data isn't always the most helpful for genetic evaluation as well. And so we have to think about it in terms of that data quality, that's going to improve our level or our accuracy of prediction within the genetic evaluation. And so ideally, as we think about this and we think about how could we maximize our accuracy of prediction, we would want large data sets of highly reliable data. I think that's no surprise to anyone probably in this room. And as many of you know, geneticists are pretty greedy when it comes to data. And so we'll always take as much as you can possibly give us. And so as we think about kind of some of our more traditional data recording programs or maybe different programs that breed associations have set up traditionally over time to collect data, I wanted to kind of give maybe a little bit of background and as well as maybe some of the initial results or some evidence that those programs are helpful. And so to kind of begin or give us a baseline understanding of what data or what the data currently looks like in the IGS genetic evaluation, I put together this tornado plot. And so if you look here on the kind of y-axis of this graph here, that would represent different pieces of data that would feed into the genetic evaluation. And then the width of the bar represents a count essentially of how many of those type or pieces of data that we have. And so to kind of give you a frame of reference here or give you, kind of what these different bars would represent, our pedigree there or the width of that pedigree bar would be about 22 million animals. And so from there, we see that the most commonly recorded phenotypes are our weight phenotypes, followed by cavities and docility, then ultrasound traits, genotypes, mature weight. So I will say that it does seem like at least a few people in the IGS population do weigh their cows. So I'll contest that it's not zero. And then our carcass traits and DMI are there towards the bottom in terms of number of phenotypes recorded. And so as we think about these different genetic evaluations and think about these phenotypes feeding into our evaluation, obviously there's traits or phenotypes that are very challenging for us to get on large levels. And I know many have talked about carcass phenotypes and some of the challenges of getting those incorporated. But I think this graph really kind of does a good job of illustrating maybe some of those challenges. And so as we think about data collection programs or different programs that have been implemented by breed associations to try to incentivize or increase data collection in terms of trying to benefit the overall genetic evaluation, probably one of the longer running or more commonly utilized across different associations in the industry would be our total herd reporting programs. I know there was a panel discussion about that yesterday. And so really kind of the goal of these obviously is to get as much complete reporting of different phenotypes within contemporary groups. And each of those programs have been implemented different ways, kind of different rules and regulations as part of those. But ultimately, that's kind of the goal, is to try to get as complete of information as we can. And so the question is this data reporting program effective, or what does it do for us in terms of accuracy of prediction, or maybe more ultimately in terms of the end users of the predictions, their advantage in participating in these types of programs. And so this table here I pulled out the average accuracy value for animals participating in the THE program, which would be a total herd reporting program at the American Semental Association, versus herds that did not participate in a total herd enrollment program. And so as you read across each row, the first row is obviously the total herd enrollment herds, and then the second row is the non-THE. And so as you look at those average EPD accuracy values, as we have more complete information included in the evaluation, obviously we see those advantages in accuracy. But I thought it's probably more important to think about that in terms of the long term, and really what is our advantage in terms of our total genetic progress that we can make over time. And so the third row here is the advantage in terms of delta G or amount of genetic change that these different groups, that the THE group would theoretically have, given all the same parameters put in there. So same generation interval, same selection intensity, just due to those differences in accuracy. And so as you think about that, I mean, those are meaningful changes or meaningful differences. And so definitely think that those programs have been successful in terms of overall increasing accuracy prediction. Additionally, as we think kind of back to the tornado graph, and we think maybe about some of the traits that are towards the bottom of that tornado graph, there's traits that are challenging to collect, and associations have set up kind of more recently several data collection programs. Many of the different IGS associations have different programs. These here on the left would be more of kind of our cow genotyping type programs. And so in order to increase our accuracy in terms of prediction of fertility type phenotypes or stability, there was, a push or a need to get additional genotypes combined with phenotypes. And many of these programs also have incentives for collecting mature weight information in them as well. If we look on the right there, those were programs that were set up to try to get more data collection efforts, more carcass data to be included in the evaluation. And so obviously trying to work our kind of way up that tornado graph. And then the one here in the middle, as we were analyzing kind of genotyping tendencies over time, similar maybe to the THR or the THE approach of complete data reporting, also wanted to look at complete genotype reporting as well. And so the program there in the middle is one that tries to get as complete a complete calf crop's worth of genotype information. And so, really in terms of focus across the different IGS breeds, really trying to maybe come up with unique ways to continue our data being included in the evaluation. And so as we think about maybe some of these different programs and what the effect these have had over time, I put together this graph. And so the x-axis here of the graph represents year of birth, and the y-axis represents of that 20 or within that birth year, the percentage of those animals that have that phenotype recorded. And so it's probably no surprise as we think about that tornado graph that our most commonly reported trait at roughly 80 to 90% of animals have some sort of growth phenotype being included in the evaluation. However, if we look at some of our other phenotypes, we do see that we've had large increases in terms of our genotype or our percentage of genotyped animals, kind of more recently getting up to about 30% of animals per year having a genotype, as well as our number of carcass records. Some of our other traits, I think, would be pretty steady in terms of reporting levels from year to year. But still kind of gives you an idea of over time what those reporting rates have looked like. And so as we think about this and we think about what, as we continue to work on genetic evaluation and we look to the future of genetic evaluation and how we could continue to improve our accuracy and prediction in genetic evaluation. Another thing, and maybe referencing back to my first slide that we've always kind of thought about are what are ways that we can expand our current data pool? And I think we've got a very obvious one, staring us in the face of the commercial beef industry and probably more recently beef on dairy data. And so we've put some effort into trying to incorporate those types of records into the IGS genetic evaluation. However, as we think about incorporating some of these types of records, we really kind of run into maybe some hurdles. And really a lot of those hurdles are due to some of the rigidness of the data requirements for incorporation into genetic evaluation. And so I just listed a couple of things here, but known pedigree information, obviously, just in trying to incorporate phenotypes purely, we would have to have some sort of phenotype or some sort of pedigree knowledge to know how that relates to other individuals, as well as there's instances where traits are maybe not recorded in a commercial beef setting on an individual. So think things like a pen level feed intake that could be used to feed back into some DMI evaluation. However, without that individual recording, it becomes challenging. And from the standpoint of a multi-breed analysis, having known breeds and breed percentages. And so despite all that and despite all of those maybe challenges, there's actually some folks that are incorporating those types of data sets into the genetic evaluation. And so kind of what I'm going to talk about here, or kind of from this point forward, is looking at what are the genetic relationships from these non-traditional, so our commercial data source as well as a beef on dairy data source, to our more traditional registered data streams. And so as we think about this, we have the unique opportunity to have a large beef on dairy data set that comes into the IGS genetic evaluation. Dr. Bob Weber has given several talks over the years at BIF here that kind of outlines a little bit more background information, but that's pretty considerable in terms of the number of phenotypes, especially carcass, that is coming into the evaluation, as well as the American Simmental Association has a registration type that's really kind of trying to target getting commercial herds and including those in the database. And so those animals are included in the regular ASA herd book. And kind of the trade-off there is instead of paying for individual registrations, it's a flat fee, but you only get genetic predictions back on your females. And so that's a program trying to get those commercial producers that want more information about the underlying genetics in their herd an opportunity to participate in the genetic evaluation. And so for each of the models, they were for both the beef on dairy and the commercial data sets, they were run very similarly, where each one was run as a bivariate analysis, where phenotypes for more traditional registered beef on beef dairy was treated as one trait, and then either the beef by dairy or commercial animals were treated as a second trait. to give just a brief overview here of the models and the fixed effects that were used. So each of these effects were included for both types of analyses. And so for each of the traits, we have a contemporary group effect, as well as sex, individual outcross, as well as individual breed percent. And then for some of our earlier in life growth traits also include a dam breed percent to estimate dam breed effects on some of those estimates. And so for both the traditional data streams and the non-traditional data streams, we had information on this, and so the model equations were the same, and then random effects were simply just direct animal effects. So kind of moving into some of the results, looking at the beef on dairy data here. Some information maybe more specifically about that analysis. So all of the beef on dairy records came from a single breeder code within the evaluation. And so we were able to identify those records via that breeder code, as well as those records didn't have any information after weaning recorded. And so we had the ability to identify those records due to maybe just some impatience, I'd say a little bit on my part in terms of just number of records of some of those earlier in life traits. We did limit the contemporary group size as well as paternal half sibs for calving and birth weight to having 50 or greater animals, as well as sires with 50 or greater progeny. For the more traditional type data streams, the way that that data was identified and included in the evaluation was those were paternal half sibs to animals in the beef on dairy data. And then for variance component estimation, that was done using the JWAS package in Julia. A little bit of information and a little bit of background here on some of the contemporary group counts. So the blue bars here in the graph would represent our more traditional type data sets. So as we look at contemporary counts for that would range anywhere from a little bit over 500 to a little bit over 2,000 contemporary groups. As we look in the beef on dairy data set, we would have those would be about 50-ish in the early in life growth traits to a little over 500 for our carcass traits. Looking at the phenotype counts or the counts of the number of phenotypes attributed to each of the different class for our more traditional data streams, our largest data source there was birth weight, which was just short of 250,000 animals. Most of our carcass was about 40,000 animals. Looking at our beef on dairy, we would have just short of 50,000 phenotypic observations for cavities, about 200,000, a little over 200,000 birth weight observations. And then for our carcass traits, we would have anywhere from about just under 150,000 to over 200,000 individual phenotypes for those beef on dairy type phenotypes. And so as we think about that, and I think this graph here probably does as good of job illustrating of some of by incorporating these types of data streams, the amount of data that is available to come into the analysis. And so definitely applaud that amount of data coming in. And so as we look here, so we've got kind of this table here represents the results of the analysis here. So the column here on the left is the individual trait or the trait that we were estimating. The first set of heritabilities here is kind of more of our traditional registered animals. The third column is the heritability of the beef on dairy animals. And then the last column here is our genetic correlation among between the traditional data sources and our beef on dairy animals. The estimates in the parentheses is a 90% credible interval. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how, as that was running, kind of how divergent that was sampling. And so as we take a look across this table and look at some of the different traits, or really what we're trying to analyze here is how similar are heritability estimates in these two data sources, as well as what is the genetic correlation that we're estimating here. And so as we look across the carcass traits and look at heritability estimates for those, generally pretty similar between the two data sets, and genetic correlations are strong and positive. Probably in terms of looking at these two data sets, maybe one that's maybe not quite as strong is looking at our Cavanese observations, where in the beef on dairy data set, the heritability was a bit lower and genetic correlation was a bit more moderate. Looking at kind of I was a bit perplexed by that, honestly, when I saw that, and just kind of the nature of the beef on dairy data. Relatively few animals are in that kind of our traditional time frame that we use for Cavanese observations, and very low levels or incidence of Cavanese and calving assistance. And so with that kind of depresses our heritability because there's not a lot of differences being expressed. And so ultimately, I think that was kind of the cause of the difference there. Next, moving into the commercial data, or the Simmental registration type D data, kind of some information about this analysis specifically. So a list of breeder codes was provided by the American Simmental Association for this analysis, because there was, I would say, the types were more similar, and there was more sires represented in the commercial type population. Did had to do some limitations in several traits, not only on contemporary group size, as well as more highly represented sires. And then similar to the beef on dairy data set, the more traditional data, or the registered data stream, was identified by being a paternal half sib to a commercial animal. And then the variance component estimation was done in very similar fashion. Looking at contemporary group counts here for our commercial data sets, our traditional data sets, those would generally range anywhere from about 1,000. Our post-weaning gain has a lot of really small contemporary groups, so that kind of shot up to just over 26 or 28,000 contemporary groups. Looking at the commercial data set, we were a bit more limited in terms of the number of contemporary groups. In all of those instances, it would be under 1,000 contemporary groups. Unique contemporary groups represented in each of those analyses. As we look at phenotype counts here, again, for our more traditional data streams, we have anywhere from about 200, almost 300,000 phenotypes recorded for birth weight, 200,000 for weaning weight and Cavanese. Post-weaning gain, we have 100,000. And then our carcass traits, we were about 40,000 observations for our more traditional data stream. Looking at our commercial side, not a huge data set as maybe what we see with our beef on dairy type stuff, but most of those would be somewhere between a couple thousand to 10,000 type observations, depending on the trait. Again, very similar table to what I put together for the beef on dairy, and so I won't quite go through that again in quite as much depth. The more traditional data streams are here in the second column. The commercial data heritabilities are in the third column, and the genetic correlations are here in the fourth column. So looking at heritabilities, those tended to be pretty similar across the commercial data set and our more traditional data streams, as well as our genetic correlation among those traits seemed to be, were very high and positive. So kind of to wrap up here, or as I'm kind of, I guess, think about looking into the future, I think, you know, obviously our goal would be not only to continue to use these types of records, but also to try to increase the amount of records that we're getting from these unique data sources. I think that, you know, as we think about the future of genetic evaluation and opportunities to increase our accuracy of prediction overall, these large commercial data sources, I think, are going to be very vital in terms of genetic evaluations and bolstering the amount of data that we have in that. I would say, as we obviously trying to get as much diversity in terms of pedigree information as we can, coming from those different data sources. And like has been mentioned numerous times throughout this week, an opportunity to collect records more easily and at higher levels than maybe what we would get from traditional type data streams. And so as I think about that, I think about, you know, traits like health, obviously the carcass ones that we've seen in terms of this analysis here. And so very beneficial in terms of increasing that amount of data in the evaluation. And so kind of just some brief thoughts or brief conclusions here. You know, obviously the goal here was to look at genetic relationships between our more traditional data stream going into our genetic evaluation, and those for the most part tended to be high, and the heritability was pretty similar with our more traditional data stream. And I think this also kind of spinning it a different way is another way to look at, you know, using data from our genetic evaluations or collected in our seed stock herds. Because we have high genetic relations or genetic relationships to these non-traditional or more commercial data streams, and just as kind of another illustration of the effectiveness in causing genetic improvement in commercial type settings. And so with that, that's all I've got for today, and I'll open it up for questions.